So the Israelites examined their food, but they did not consult the Lord. Then Joshua made a peace treaty with them and guaranteed their safety, and the leaders of the community ratified their agreement with a binding oath. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Alright, so we are looking at Joshua chapter 9, and basically events in Joshua up to this point. Israelites crossed the Jordan River. They renewed a couple ceremonial things to help reinforce their commitment to God. They went and attacked Jericho, basically making the walls crumble by walking around it a bunch and then shouting really loud on the seventh day. And then, right after that, somebody apparently took some stuff from Jericho that they weren't supposed to, which brought ill fortune, but also, brought God's displeasure, you could say, upon them. They tried to fight another town, city thing, were unsuccessful. Basically just got driven away. And then they figure out that something's wrong, find out who it is, they fix it, and then they go back and fight the same place that they had just been chased away from, and this time they're successful. And that is what's happened so far. So, just saying that might be relevant for context for this chapter. So anyway, Joshua chapter 9. Now all the kings west of the Jordan River heard about what had happened. These were the kings of the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, who lived in the hill country in the western foothills and along the Mediterranean Sea as far north as the Lebanon mountains. These kings combined their armies to fight as one against Joshua and the Israelites. Okay. So you would assume then these kings were all worried about, their kingdoms getting sort of picked off one by one by the Israelites. So they decided to combine their forces, because Israel had already, at that point, taken down Jericho and Ai, or however that one's pronounced. Footnote there at foothills, Hebrew says the Shephelah, or Shephelah, whatever. That's just kind of the Hebrew name for it. I don't know for sure about the translation, if that particularly matters. And Hebrew says the Great Sea instead of the Mediterranean Sea. It just probably wasn't called the Mediterranean Sea at that time, but it's referring to the same sea. Similarly, Hebrew saying the Shephelah here, it's the same thing as the Western Foothills. It's just a different name for it. So, yeah. Kings combine their forces. Kings from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different kingdoms combine their forces. All those troops that were counted back in Numbers are seeming very relevant at the moment. But, okay, then we get to verse 3. But when the people of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to deception to save themselves. They sent ambassadors to Joshua, loading their donkeys with weathered saddlebags and old patched wineskins. They put on worn-out patched sandals and ragged clothes. And the bread they took with them was dry and moldy. When they arrived at the camp of Israel at Gilgal, they told Joshua and the men of Israel, "We have come from a distant land to ask you to make a peace treaty with us." So they're making themselves look weaker than they probably actually are. And, like, they basically have nothing to live off of. And that's why they're making themselves look all ragged and poor and like everything that they have is old. So the Israelites are still camped at Gilgal, though, which is where they had camped, I think, right when they crossed the Jordan River. Either that or right after they defeated Jericho, but they haven't changed their main camp super recently. Okay, verse 7. The Israelites replied to these Hivites, "How do we know you don't live nearby? For if you do, we cannot make a treaty with you." They replied, "We are your servants." "But who are you?" Joshua demanded. "Where do you come from?" They answered, "Your servants have come from a very distant country. We have heard of the might of the Lord your God and of all he did in Egypt. We have also heard what he did to the 2 Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, King Sihon of Heshbon and King Og of Bashan, who lived in Ashtaroth. So our elders and all our people instructed us, 'Take supplies for a long journey. Go meet with the people of Israel and tell them, we are your servants. Please make a treaty with us.'" So I guess everything they had looking worn out was also to give the impression that they came on a long journey from a distant country. And the Israelites obviously couldn't make a peace treaty with them if they lived nearby, because that would be the promised land, the land that they're supposed to be, taking over and settling in. But the Gibeonites, who I guess apparently are a subgroup of the Hivites, which was one of the kings mentioned up here, or the kingdoms, they wanted to make it seem like they came from a far-off country in hopes of making some sort of treaty, even though they actually live close by. So, verse 12. I guess this is still the Hivites speaking. "This bread was hot from the ovens when we left our homes, but now, as you can see, it is dry and moldy." Sorry. Ugh. "These wineskins were new when we filled them, but now they are old and split open, and our clothing and sandals are worn out from our very long journey." So the Israelites examined their food, but they did not consult the Lord. Then Joshua made a peace treaty with them and guaranteed their safety, and the leaders of the community ratified their agreement with a binding oath. So, note that it says they did not consult the Lord. I guess it was one of those things where Joshua and the leaders felt like they were able to judge the situation well enough themselves without consulting the Lord. But honestly, that's ringing a bell rather reminiscent of a very recent thing that I did. Long story short, I was taking a test on, AI accuracy. And just, kind of saying, okay, is this a good response? Is this a bad response? Why or why not? And different things like that. And one of the questions in particular, it seemed like the one response was a better response just on the surface level. But it proved that, like, I had to actually research these things and know for sure what was going on. Because the response that seemed to be, the more thorough and just overall better response to the initial question prompt thing, turns out it was actually just making stuff up. The prompt was asking about certain books and, wanting a description of those books, like kind of a general outline. The problem is, the books mentioned in the prompt don't actually exist. So, the one response that looked better because it was giving summaries of these books was actually just making stuff up about what it assumed books with those titles would have in them. Meanwhile, the other response that pretty much just said, sorry, we can't do that, we don't have access to these. On the surface, it seemed like a lame, just bad response. Like it just didn't have access to enough information. Turns out, the books don't actually exist, and that's why it said that. It just sort of explained it poorly, which made you think, that the other one that gave an explanation or like a summary was the better response on the surface. It wasn't. So, similarly, the elders in Joshua, on the surface, thought that they could kind of judge things pretty well for themselves. But they didn't consult the Lord and do the research to get the full story. There's a lot of things in life that if we don't do the research / consult the Lord on the matters at hand, what seems like the best course of action might actually not be. But if we do the work, if we pray, if we consult the Lord and, trusted people around us who we know are also seeking God and in touch with God in a similar way, that, doing that, we can get the full story and then respond in the way that's actually better for the situation. Anyway, enough about that tangent. So, they make a treaty with these Hivites who they don't realize actually live close by. And then, verse 16. 3 days after making the treaty, they learned that these people actually lived nearby. The Israelites set out at once to investigate and reached their towns in 3 days. The names of these towns were Gibeon, Kephirah, Beeroth, and Kiriath Jearim. But the Israelites did not attack the towns, for the Israelite leaders had made a vow to them in the name of the Lord, the God of Israel. The people of Israel grumbled against their leaders because of the treaty. But the leaders replied, "Since we have sworn an oath in the presence of the Lord, the God of Israel, we cannot touch them. This is what we must do. We must let them live, for divine anger would come upon us if we broke our oath. Let them live." So they made them woodcutters and water carriers for the entire community, as the Israelite leaders directed. So, okay, I'm a little confused at what it's saying at the end there, but in short, Israelites found out that these people did live nearby. They kind of wanted to attack these people, but then realized that they couldn't because of the oath that they made. And the fact that it was a binding oath that was sworn in the presence of the Lord, they would be dishonoring God and thus bringing wrath upon themselves if they broke that oath. So, with this question, though, is it saying that the people of Israel made, like, tools for cutting wood and carrying water and gave those to, like, these towns? Or is it saying that they, like, you know, instead of fighting the people of those towns, that the Israelites just, like, kind of forced them to be servants and made the people from those towns be the woodcutters and water carriers? I'm not totally sure which way that it's meaning that. Maybe it'll make more sense if we read on. So, verse 22. Joshua called together the Gibeonites and said, "Why did you lie to us? Why did you say that you live in a distant land when you live right here among us? May you be cursed. From now on, you will always be servants who cut wood and carry water for the house of my God." Okay, that explains the previous question that I had. They replied, "We did it because we, your servants, were clearly told that the Lord your God commanded his servant Moses to give you this entire land and to destroy all the people living in it. So we feared greatly for our lives because of you. That is why we have done this. Now we are at your mercy. Do to us whatever you think is right." So Joshua did not allow the people of Israel to kill them. But that day he made the Gibeonites the woodcutters and water carriers for the community of Israel and for the altar of the Lord, whenever the Lord would choose to build it. And that is what they do to this day. So, basically, because of the oath, they were pretty much bound by loyalty and by their own words to not, you know, actually fight the people of these towns. But, I mean, it just says up here they made a peace treaty and guaranteed their safety. It didn't say necessarily that they wouldn't, you know, put these people to work or make them do something else like that. So it's not necessarily breaking the oath to have these people sort of serve them, so to speak, as woodcutters and water carriers. So, I mean, still, probably much better from the perspective of these other people to still be alive and just, you know, do some grunt work for these other stronger people. Better that than to be dead, which is what they basically knew would happen if they hadn't made some sort of treaty like this. So, yeah, the Israelites got tricked. But, like, I guess they still kind of take control of the land. They just don't kill the people. Anyway, okay. So, that does it for Joshua 9. Okay, so I'm seeing a bit of a pattern here already. Israelites win, then they do something bad. They make it right, then they win. Repeat the cycle. I mean, granted, I don't know if you can call it a cycle yet since it's only been twice thus far, but I wouldn't be surprised if that keeps happening. I'm just saying. So this was the bad thing. They kind of made it right at the end by keeping their word, but also not just, like, letting the Gibeonites be. So, Maybe. Well, maybe we'll see in the next chapter. But for now, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell if you're on YouTube to get updates when I post new videos. If you're seeing this over on Rumble, give me a follow there too. Either way, look down in the description to get info on other social media pages and stuff like that. I have a Discord now, and I'm ready for people to start joining it if you're interested. Anyway, make sure to leave comments with any thoughts you have. So that's going to do it. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. But whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.